What's up, everybody? It's the Inhuman one here, and today I'm going to take you to the deepest, darkest depths of the sea, a place seemingly full of mysterious creatures hidden in the lightless abyss. In this video, we're going to analyze the behemoth in underwater and determine if this massive beast has what it takes to be called Cthulhu, and, most importantly, if something like this could truly exist. If you didn't deduce the Lovecraftian references in the final act of Underwater, the director has confirmed in multiple interviews that the giant beast featured in the ending scenes is indeed Cthulhu. With that being said, let's take a deep dive into the source material and see if William Eubanks' version of the creature measures up. Cthulhu was first introduced to us in 1926 in H.P. Lovecraft's short story Call of Cthulhu. This gigantic aquatic creature belonged to a group of extra-dimensional beings known as the Great Old Ones. Much like its modern variant, the Cthulhu was, for lack of a better term, accidentally awakened from a seemingly eternal slumber. In the original short story, a group of innocent sailors accidentally opened a portal that interrupted the ancient priest's beauty sleep. In Underwater, it is the disruptive effects of deep-sea drilling that awakens the sleeping giant. Now let's analyze the size, powers, and abilities of both versions of Cthulhu to see if the modern interpretation does the classic variation any justice. In the short story written by Lovecraft, Cthulhu stands hundreds of meters tall and was compared to a walking mountain. In Underwater, the sheer size and unimaginable scale is captured in such a believable way. Simply put, this beast is massive, as it towers over these man-made structures, truly emphasizing the insignificance of the human race. This behemoth is easily several hundred meters tall and is not only large enough but strong enough to hold what seems to be hundreds, if not thousands, of its servants. Interestingly enough, despite the extraterrestrial origins of Cthulhu and the cosmic proportions of its physical form, the beasts in both fictional works seem to resort to primitive and quite honestly ineffective strikes that seem to do nothing but inflict massive amounts of collateral damage. In the short story, Cthulhu is disappointingly dispatched by simply ramming a yacht into his gargantuan cuttlefish head. In the film, the creature is destroyed by the explosions caused by a reactor meltdown. It is unknown if this version of Cthulhu was completely eradicated by the blast or if it shares regenerative properties like the original did in Lovecraft's short story. In the ending sequences of the film, there are shots of newspaper clippings that seem to allude to a corporate cover-up that hid any details regarding the incidents surrounding the creatures that were discovered or the true cause of the reactor meltdown. Additionally, the survivors' testimonies were never able to surface, or were simply suppressed by the TN Industries. This is most likely due to the fact that TN Industries was aware of the existence of these previously unidentified species and was likely meddling with forces that were well beyond their understanding. One of the major differences that I would like to mention is the fact that the original Cthulhu was given the title of priest. This would imply that he is part of a larger community that has a culture, religion, and roles that each individual must fulfill. In Underwater, this Cthulhu seems to simply be a gigantic aquatic organism that has no visible supernatural abilities, nor does it seem to have any extraterrestrial origins. This seemed evident due to the fact that the protagonist of the film was able to maintain her sanity while she developed a plan to destroy the creature despite viewing it for an extended period of time. In the short story, those who witnessed the creature eventually lost their minds and perished due to beholding a sight that was too grand for human minds to fathom. This lends credence to the original argument that the Cthulhu in Underwater is simply an unknown species of deep-sea creature that biologists have yet to identify. And despite the fact that the director mentioned and quote-unquote confirmed that this was Cthulhu, that decision was not even made until post-production, as the initial name for the creature was simply the Behemoth. With that being said, let's cast all of the mythical notions aside and determine if a creature like the Cthulhu in Underwater could truly exist in real life. The varying depths of the ocean are categorized into layers. The deepest layer is referred to as the Abyssal Zone or the Abyssal Pelagic Zone, named after the Greek word abyss, meaning bottomless. At depths of 4,000 meters and deeper, this zone receives no light from the sun and is blanketed in an eerie perpetual darkness. For all of my American viewers out there, this is nearly 2.5 miles deep. Despite how frightful this may be, the Abyssal Zone actually comprises 60% of the Earth's surface. These numbers allow for a nearly endless amount of space for unknown creatures to inhabit, considering the fact that deep-sea layers such as these have remained largely unexplored. Furthermore, there is an even lower zone that exists below the Abyssal Zone referred to as the Hadal Zone, named after the Greek word Hades, allowing for even greater amounts of space for creatures of this magnitude to live in. As there is no light reaching the abyssal layer, oxygen-producing plants are unable to survive at those depths, which results in a decline in the available oxygen. This, coupled with a high level of salt content, due to large amounts of dead organic material sinking to the lower layers, and the temperature hovering just above freezing, create a harsh environment where only the strong and strange can survive. In order to survive in a region that is devoid of light, lacking in oxygen, scarce in resources, and crushed by intense pressure, creatures have had to adapt in a number of ways in order to combat the challenges that come along with life on the cold, dead seafloor. Some of the adaptations include slower metabolisms to conserve energy, low reproduction rates, nature's way of rationing out resources, extremely flexible stomachs and mouths to optimize feeding when possible, and bioluminescence to create light where the sun don't shine. With the above being taken into consideration, it is actually quite possible for an extremely large organism like the Cthulhu underwater to exist in the deepest, darkest recesses of the sea, especially when you take into account that the biomass for the Abyssal Zone, which is the total mass of organisms within a specific area or volume, actually spikes in this region due to the sheer amount of dead organisms that have drifted down from the upper layers of the ocean. If such a monstrosity were to exist, it would most likely be a scavenger and feed off of a combination of the detritus and possibly even by siphoning energy from the hydrothermal vents. The latter would most likely serve as another feeding ground for Cthulhu, as bacteria tend to use the vents to convert food into energy and larger creatures feed off of the bacteria. In essence, the vents would be the prime spot to obtain large amounts of nutrients in one sitting, expending minimal amounts of energy. Cthulhu, due to its massive size, would most likely take long slumbers in between feeding sessions, most likely serving as periods of hibernation, which would contribute to its mythical mystique. Reproduction would most likely mirror that of the tripod fish, which has both male and female organs so that it can self-fertilize. Due to the fact that any single ecosystem would be unable to sustain more than one of these creatures in close proximity, reproduction would most likely be a solo act for the sake of energy conservation and resource management. Another thing to note is that these smaller creatures, that I will refer to as deep ones, could potentially be sharing a symbiotic relationship with Cthulhu. Based on several scenes in the final act of Underwater, it seems that the deep ones share a mutualistic symbiosis with Cthulhu, meaning both species are benefiting from the relationship. This is often seen with clownfish residing within patches of sea anemone. In the film, Cthulhu is almost completely covered by the deep ones, which most likely use it as a threat deterrent from other predators. They are also likely to find food in all of the squishy Cthulhu's nooks and crannies. Cthulhu benefits from the symbiosis by way of commanding the deep ones to attack nearby threats. This is evident in the escape scene where Cthulhu orders its underlings to capture and destroy the escape pods the survivors used to reach the surface. In the end, after everything we have learned, it is not too far-fetched to believe that a creature of this magnitude could be lurking beneath the very seas that surround every landmass on planet Earth. Perhaps the most frightening thing of all is not the mythical creature from one's imagination, but rather the very real creatures that dwell in the deepest, darkest depths of the abyss. And that's all for this video, and until next time, it's the Inhuman one signing out. Welcome to my universe.